Remember when we forgot how life worked because of the sensory overload of 8-bit video games? When every button we saw became an alien blaster, or a ghost muncher, or a dig dug, whatever that was. Well, let's take a trip back to the not-so-golden age of 80s video game movies as we revisit the arcade classic, Joysticks!
In a world filled with intergalactic space battles, metahuman destruction on a global scale, and psychopathic serial hauntings, there's only one team who can make sense of it all. When your world is overrun with rampant pop culture, call Loop and Larry, Guardians of Geek.
Yep.
Season ender explosion.
Season ender explosion. So different than all the other ones we've done.
Well, I feel like every explosion's a little different because it's part of a different episode. So
That is true.
Something about it that's slightly different. That's why we have to acknowledge it every single time. 79 times we've acknowledged it, and we will keep acknowledging it because it's awesome.
Gotta love an explosion at any given time, you know. Like,
Exactly, yeah.
as long as you're not near it. At any
No.
time from a distance, you can enjoy it. Hey,
That's
everybody, I'm Loop.
And I'm Larry.
And this is Guardians of Geek. This is our final episode of the season. It's episode 79, if you're counting. And that means we're only 21 away from 100 episodes.
That's so we've got about 5 more years before we hit that mark, which is great.
We should, like, next season try for 21 episodes. I think
I think we could do it. I think we can pull it. They'll each be about 5 minutes long, but we'll do it. We're gonna.
If we actually did like 2 a month, I think we could make it, because in 10 months there'd be 20. So it's very doable.
All right, let's put that on your resolutions.
Yeah, to finish 21 episodes
Yeah.
of Loop and Larry. I think like it is doable. It's just a matter of us doing it.
Well, that's the thing. Is it doable for us? It's doable for the average person. Is it doable for us? I don't know. Those are totally different things.
We'll find out.
I guess we will.
Well, let's get right into it. Let's go to Top Pop.
All right.
Hey kids, it's time for Loop and Larry's Totally Tubular Top Pop!
All right, we are back. Top Pop, where we look at just things that are going on geek-wise in our lives. Maybe it could be something coming up that we're excited about. Could be something that we're just into at the time. And we just came back from the Niagara Falls Comic Con.
Yes.
Which is pretty cool.
It is. It's one of our favorites. I mean, we do. I'd say we probably do at least four cons a year, because we do. There's a London one. There's Fan Expo. There's Niagara Falls Comic Con, and usually we do Frightmare at the Falls, which is a horror con. So we usually do it at least 4 a year. And I'd say this is the Niagara Falls Comic Con is in my top 4 Comic Cons that we do each year. It's great. It's a really good one. It's a lot of fun, I think. So
Yeah, I love this one. It's just a little bit smaller, but still has some decent star power at it. Like if you're into like celebrities, and awesome floor, like as far as just all the different people to look at, the vendors and things. There's just so much to look at, which I love.
There is. And this year the celebrities were neat. They had Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo as a little bit of a vacation reunion. They had Chris Jericho, who Loop was super excited about.
Yep.
Who else did they have? But the big draw of this year, which surprised both of us, was Peter Weller, or as he is now known, Dr. Peter Weller. Dr. Peter Weller, who played RoboCop. His line was just unstoppable. He was only there for the Saturday. We got in, the doors opened at 10. We got there about 10:15 and went straight to his line. And his line at 10:15 was already capped. We couldn't even get in it. And so all day long, we kept going back, trying to get into this line. And it wasn't until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon that I finally got in the line, and I got through it. And then he had a Q&A, came back. The place closed at 6. And at 10 to 6, his line was still probably at least a half an hour long. Like, it was unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if people, I mean, he was also there because of Sons of Anarchy because he was in some episodes. He directed 3 episodes per season, I think is what he said. So I mean, he's got a few franchises, but it was just unbelievable. He was definitely the biggest draw, I think, of this con, which is great. I mean, it's great that people still love Robo.
Yeah, it was weird because it wasn't like he wasn't like a main person. He was there, like, and I guess he is a main person because people loved him, like they more than anybody else almost. Like he was like a really like hot commodity, other than like Chevy Chase and maybe Chris Jericho. Like those were probably, I would say, the top ones
I
that I
would think
saw
so.
that I saw big lines for.
Yeah.
Another sleeper was Heather Langenkamp, who
Yes.
I never once went by her line. I got a photo with her, but I never once went by her line. From Nightmare on Elm Street, by the way. That didn't there wasn't people in it.
It was amazing. But then you had people like Edward James Olmos, who was there, who I feel like is a pretty big name. I mean, he was in Battlestar Galactica and among other things.
Dexter and like all sorts of stuff.
Dexter.
He's been in
He,
everything. Like he's
he
yeah.
he had almost nobody. Like anytime I went by his table, it was empty. Like there was nobody in line. It was such a weird, like you never really know who's going to be popular and who's not.
It's
Because I
feast or
just
famine on some of them for sure.
it is. And even Lou
Lou
Diamond
Diamond Phillips.
was there, and I figured that he'd be a pretty big draw, but his line was sort of mediocre too. I don't know, but yeah, Peter Weller was just like out the door around the corner 5 times. I don't know. It was so hard to predict.
And Peter Weller's been to some of these before, right? Because you've gotten his autograph in the past.
I have. That was the first time he had been in Niagara Falls, though, because we
Okay.
talked about that. I said I'd met him before in Toronto. I said, "Have you been here before?" And he said, "No." So that was his first time there. And usually, if it's a first time for somebody at a con, they're popular. But I mean, this was crazy. I thought that was odd. And there were the other sort of shockers. I guess they're not too big of shockers, but there were 2 Star Wars celebrities. One was Paul Blake, who played Greedo.
Yep.
He was the one who actually got shot first. And then Femi Taylor, who played Ula, who was the Twi'lek dancer in Jabba's palace. And I mean, neither of them had big roles, but they've become pretty iconic
Yeah.
characters. Femi Taylor had nobody in line virtually for the whole weekend. I met her and got an autograph, and she was lovely, such a nice person, and so happy to talk. And so we talked for a while because there was nobody there. Anytime I went by, her lineup was completely empty.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, it was such a weird thing. Like it was,
I get.
you know,
I guess it just depends what people are into. Like this, like sometimes it might be I think if they would have had another like bigger Star Wars person there,
yeah,
like the people that come for Star Wars for I don't know, like a Mark Hamill, let's say, those
yeah,
people probably would have benefited from that. But because
yes,
Star Wars wasn't really the focus of obviously like there's a bit of a Back to the Future, some like Vacation, like all the Chevy Chase stuff. So I
yeah,
think they just weren't didn't just draw because of that,
yeah,
and plus too, they're kind of is like if you're a Star Wars fan, you're into it. But if you're kind of like a sub Star Wars fan, you might not
yeah.
even know who they are. Or
I know that she is a rare attendee. I mean, she does these things.
yeah,
I always gravitate towards the Star Wars people, and I had actually met Paul Blake before and had him autograph something. I brought something else for him to autograph this time, but I've never met her before. Like in all the years, and we realize we've been doing these cons for 20 years now, and in
yeah.
all cons that we've done, which means we've done dozens of cons, she's never been there. So like she's a rare person, so I kind
Yeah.
of thought because she was rare, maybe people would be interested, but nobody. It just
I
you
guess
kind of feel bad for people like when they don't get anybody in their line.
yeah, and of course, so we weren't in the room every minute, so you don't know
Right.
who was at the table and who wasn't. And again, there's like some people are just they're in big, like they're the stars of like Peter Weller of RoboCop, which is a massive movie franchise. Those guys are going to have people in their lines all the time, and the other people are and I think like Edward James Olmos was probably a product of just there's other people to spend money on,
Yeah.
and unless you're a big Battlestar Galactica fan or something, it just depends, I guess, what people like. Because normally people I would think would, if they're gonna do photo ops or autographs, because of the cost of them now, Like you're looking at almost $100 for an autograph now and things.
Oh,
They're probably going to put them in like a top 3 of who they really want, and then some of these people just were probably in those top 3s, depending who it is. So
that's true. And you're right about the cost. Like the cost has gone way up. Chevy Chase for just an autograph was $230 from just to sign a 8x10 photo of himself. It was crazy. Like it was crazy. I had Peter Weller sign I have a 12-inch statue of RoboCop, and I took the base of the statue with me so he could autograph that. That was $120. Like
yeah.
like the costs of these things is really skyrocketing. When we started going to cons 20 years ago, I distinctly remember the first con we went to was Fan Expo in Toronto, and it was a very small, and they had like Kenny Baker, who played R2D2, was there, and Kevin Sorbo. Like they had a fairly good selection, but autographs were $20. Like
Yeah, they were really cheap.
You hand them a $20 bill and you get your autograph. So in the last 20 years, they've gone from being $20 for an autograph to $120. Like it's really kind of becoming cost prohibitive for a lot of people.
I wish back then I would have like got more autographs and photos.
Yeah.
Like they didn't really do photo ops back then. Like it wasn't until a few years later.
But remember, with every $20 autograph, you could just like get a picture, stand beside them, and they'll be like,
yeah. I just mean they didn't have the professional photo ops at that time. But I wish at that time I would have done more photo ops and stuff, or like at least photos with some of these people. I guess the first one we went to, I didn't really know what was going on. I was so confused by everything. Like I got a couple, but I think I might have gotten what was his name, Dwight Schultz from A-Team, and then somebody else. I think that was the first year. I can't remember. It was all like I just wasn't sure what was happening. It was so crazy. Like I'm like, there's Crispin Glover just sitting there. Like it was so weird. So
it was so strange. But yeah, you could get an autograph and a photo for $20. So you just they're signing and you say, "Can I have a photo with you?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, come on over here." But now it's all separate. You could do like at Niagara Falls, you paid $80 for a autograph, and then another $80 if you wanted a selfie at their table. So
and photo ops were going for like 150 to 120 to 150 because it's like the photo op plus you have to pay an extra 10 if you want digital copy, plus then there's like all the taxes and everything, and then all of a sudden it's at like 150 and you're like, what? but you got to pay if you want your photos. Like I did Lee Thompson and I did Chris Jericho and I did Heather Langenkamp, and it was like, I don't know what I paid, but anyways, I don't want to look at it, but I'm like, it was just more expensive than it normally. I find that con a little more expensive than the other ones.
I think so too. But we've always talked about how once it comes time to go to a con, cons are like a license to spend money. For some reason, when you're at a con, you don't really even think about the cost of things. You're like, I need to get that autograph. I'll just go to the bank machine. I'll just say, it's the weirdest thing. You just sort of like any place else, you'd like hum and haw about buying a thing. Like Loop and I both bought swords. We didn't intend to buy swords, but they gave us like really good price. We're like, yep, we'll take them.
I need a sword. I needed it.
Apparently we needed swords.
I think the thing too, there's always that fear, and I think this is like with most geeks, like the fear of like missing out on something, like it's not going to be there when you go next time. So like certain things, like it's like if I come back to this table, this may not be here. Or if I don't get my, picture with Chris Jericho now, he may never come to a con again. And it's that kind of thinking. And so that's what really pushes like what you're spending, because it's like you just don't want to miss out.
I totally agree. It's like urgency. Like this stuff is only here for these 3 days that we're here. If we don't get it now, somebody else is definitely going to get it, and I'm never going to see it again. And, 100%. Like that's how cons work. That's why they work. And that's why they can charge whatever they want, because they know people are going to pay it. Because you never know. You don't know if you're going to ever see Chevy Chase again, or I mean. So and there have been occasions where we've been at cons where we've gotten pictures with people and they've since passed away. Who is the one?
Borgnine's a good example.
Yeah, we both got
and there's only like about 10 people in line for that too. There was nobody, like there was no interest in him. I had interest in him, so I went and got a photo op, but It was
Exactly. And then, and then he passed away. So there is, I mean, especially for the older celebrities that show up, this could be like, I mean, it really could be the last time. Like Edward James almost is getting up there in age. Like
yeah.
he's an older gentleman now. So, I don't know how much longer he's going to be able to do these things. So, you don't want to miss those opportunities if you want them. So you
Yeah.
pay what it costs.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of things we may not want to see again, the Acolyte came out.
Right.
And
That was awesome.
transition.
Yep, that was a good one. It did. And we both watched so far. Yes.
Yeah, so the Acolyte, you explain what the Acolyte is, because I'm still confused.
Okay, so it's the new Star Wars movie or TV series that came out on Disney Plus. As of the recording of this podcast, which is the 11th of June, only 2 episodes have come out so far. Episode 3 will come out later tonight. So we've only seen the first 2 episodes, but it takes place 132 years before A New Hope. So about 100 years before Phantom Menace. So it's in the High Republic era that the recent series of books is based on. So this one is sort of a like a murder mystery theme. A Jedi Knight has been murdered, and it looks like somebody has been framed. I don't want to give away too much because it's still fairly new, but it looks like somebody's been framed for the murder, and but then there's like potentially a dark Jedi master, or I don't know if they're a Sith. We're not sure. There's a lot of
Yeah, we don't know yet
a lot of mystery involved. So there was a lot of potential here for something brand new, because there are no returning characters. Everybody in here is brand new. So I mean, unless you've read the books, then there are some characters from the books. But as far as the TV shows and movies, all brand new. Story's new.
The only characters that could show up maybe are Yoda and maybe a teenage Chewbacca, possibly. I don't know how old Chewbacca is, but
I think Chewbacca's like 400 or something.
So
like that.
he like a angst Baka.
Baka. Exactly. So they could show up. I don't know how, but it's possible. But yeah, that's where it is. And this one, though, one of the big hype factors around it was that Carrie-Anne Moss was playing a Jedi Master in this, and then they hyped that a lot. And yes, she did for about 10 minutes.
Yes. I don't want to give too much away, but it's my first initial thoughts of this series is like, it's intriguing in a way, but there's some things that have already irritating me about it.
Yes.
Like there's a lot of Jedi, and it's not explained really well what the High Republic is or what's going on. And like, why are there like 5,000 Jedi? Like, it doesn't really. It's a different time period, obviously, before like everything went downhill. But but anyways, I'm gonna give it time, because I think there's a lot more that we'll learn from it as we go. And I think that it's like, I don't want to like judge everything off the first couple episodes, because there are some highlights in it that I did like. And then there's some stuff that I felt was kind of goofy, but
that's true. And there's been the 2 episodes have been released. I've watched both episodes twice because I thought maybe the first time maybe I was missing something. My issue with it right now is because these are all brand new characters, they had to give us some really solid either backstory or make these characters super compelling, because we don't know them. So in order for us to care about them and want to keep watching them, they had to be like really interesting, or really, have some hook to make us care about them. And so far, 2 episodes in, I don't care about anybody. Quite honestly, I'm not finding any of the characters compelling. So I don't really care who's doing what. Visually it looks cool.
It does look good visually, for sure.
Yeah, it does look cool. And I guess I have to just say my only other criticism of it, well, I've got lots of criticisms of it, but the bigger one is it's 132 years before A New Hope. So I was really hoping that it would look a lot different, that the technology would be different, or you know what I mean, that it would, but it literally looks exactly the same as the New Hope era. Like they're still the same lightsabers, Their Jedi robes are the same. They're a bit different color, but the ships are the same and big. I mean, they're not the same type of ship, but they're still the same technology. Doors open and close the same way they did. It literally could be like, there's no reason why it has to be 132 years ago, because it looks exactly the same as,
Yeah, there's a few things in it that
except
are
more colorful. Like it's more colorful. Like
yeah.
the buildings have some blues and pinks and different colors in them. It's not all just sand. But other than that, I was just hoping for it to be less technology and more, I don't know, ancient looking.
Yeah, yeah, it's got some issues, but I mean, again, like this may turn out to be the best series we've ever seen. Like we don't know, right? It's the first couple episodes, so we'll just see. It's hard
Exactly.
because you compare it instantly to all the other shows, and some have been
Yes.
hits and some have been misses. But we'll,
Yeah.
it's
So
just we'll see how it goes.
we'll keep talking about it, and I'm sure we'll review it. It'll be either on our best of or worst of 2024 lists when we do the end of the year. We're not sure yet, but we will stick.
So you wanted less AI and you wanted more like joysticks is what you wanted. Like
Yes, yes, the classic 8-bit technology would have been great. Yeah, I wonder where
you
we
know
could
what?
get
Let's go to pop capacitor.
that. Okay.
All right, that was one of the worst transitions ever. I tried on that one. It wasn't great. It wasn't great, but it was okay. Hey, everybody, this is the pop capacitor. This is where we take a look back at something, old movie, TV show, video game, toy, and then see if it still stands up. And we have done a toy before, so I can say that.
You can say it now.
We can say it. Thanks to Hugo. That was our first episode of the season, wasn't it?
That's right. I think it
Yeah,
was.
Yeah. So today we're doing Joysticks, which just got another re-release recently, which I just purchased. So that's what sort of spawned this. Of course, Larry, huge fan of like the Atari video game era, and we're both fans of stand-up video games for sure. Like the old arcades, as we like to call them. This movie came out in 1983, directed by Graydon Clark. I don't know if he wants his name on this or not, but we'll find out. When a top local businessman and his two bumbling nephews try to shut down the town's only video arcade, the arcade employees and patrons fight back. So there you go. That's what it was shot in 3 weeks.
Yep.
And I would put this movie in the teen sex romp category. So
100%.
movies like Screwballs, Hard Bodies, Hot Dog the movie, Ski School, like these are all those type of movies where there's always like a bunch of girls in bikinis and like stupid guys, and it's like just like a dumb comedy essentially is what it is. Yeah,
that's exactly
what. But a classic 80s comedy though. That's a
classic 80s. Classic
80s.
So we're gonna go through our hits and our misses and see if this thing still holds up all these years later.
So we'll start with you, Larry. What's some of your hits or misses? What do you want to start with?
Okay, well, I'll start off with a hit because I actually have a few in this round. And I'm gonna start right at the beginning with the opening theme song. I think it's called Joysticks.
I had this as well. This is the same mine as well.
The lyrics, first of all, the music is super 80s, like it's synthesizer and super 80s, but the lyrics are so literal. They're literal, like talking about I need a quarter, totally awesome video game, nothing rhymes. Like they're terrible lyrics, but they are so fitting for this movie because this movie is just kind of goofy and doesn't make a lot. Well, I mean, it makes sense, but it's just so like off the cuff kind of thing. So the lyrics in the opening song totally set the stage for like how goofy this movie is, because the song is pretty goofy too, but it's so quintessentially 80s. I just loved it. I love this theme song.
Yeah, I had this as a hit as well. It was like I love the whole opening sequence because it's the classic where it's like you've got the titles coming on of like the director and some of the actors, and then you've got this like kind of like 80s pop rock like theme song. And then you've got like the close-up shots of kids playing video games, and
Yeah.
totally sets the scene of what this is going to be right off the top, like this wacky sort of like teen comedy. So no, it was
Yeah.
great. I was like, as soon as I heard the music, I was like, okay, this is going to be good right off the
Yeah.
top.
I
And when I say
totally.
good, I mean bad, but
Oh,
good bad.
exactly. Okay, what do you got next?
Okay, so for another hit I had, I'll just start with that. They have obviously a video game theme in this thing, and I love one of my hits is that seeing all the old video games
Yes.
that were featured in this, and
Yeah.
I thought, and I was sure like there would be some in the background, but I thought it was mostly going to be fake video games they were going to show, like
Yeah.
these like weird ones that they've made up just because there was probably copyright issues, but. Nope, it was all they got the rights to them all.
Yep.
Everything from like Pole Position to Moon Patrol, Gorf,
Oh,
Miss Pac-Man, Defender, like they're all there, like Millipede, Defender, like everything was in this movie. And I thought that was really cool that they were able to put all these movies in there, or all these these video games in there that I remember as a kid.
Yep.
And it was awesome to watch them and see them all in the background. So it totally took me back to going
Yeah.
to arcades.
I that was my second hit too. Like I had the exact same thing, that they actually could license Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man and Space Invaders. But I mean, and Pac-Man actually plays a big part in the movie, like the actual gameplay. So you see
Yeah.
a lot of video, like a lot of close-ups of the screen of Pac-Man being played with the sound effects. So I'm really glad that they were able to secure these licenses, because if they had to make up their own video games, it would not have had the same impact. Like it really felt like an actual arcade. I mean, when it came out in 1983, this was like the height of this phenomenon. So if they hadn't been able to show real games, I think this people would have just been like, what are they doing? Like this isn't, I can't relate. But because they got the rights to it, it genuinely felt like that's the way arcades felt. Like
Yeah.
going, because I used to go to arcades all the time, like all the time. And this movie made it feel like what it felt like in 1983 to go to video arcades, because the real games were there and you heard
Yeah.
the sounds and the sound effects. It was great. I love that. It was very authentic.
Yes, apparently the director, he wanted to use like the images of Pac-Man and that. So Midway is the company that owns all that.
Yeah.
So he went to them, they agreed, and then he actually got the rights to he wanted like rights to a brand new video game that hadn't really come out yet to draw the appeal of kids to come see it. And apparently it was called Satan's Hollow is the name of the game, and it's the one that's played in the face-off at the end. Between
Right.
like there's a big face-off at the end between two people. So that's the game they used at that. And that game hadn't come out yet, and obviously didn't do well because I don't think I've ever heard of Satan's Hollow,
No.
but maybe. But I don't think this movie pushed that into any sort of popularity by any stretch. But it was it was just cool to see these games. I also love at this time too, how like movies like this, good or bad, really try to jump on like what's trendy at the time.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
because of that, the movie really feels authentic, and it feels like this is like right. They're not like going back and trying to like relive something. They're in the moment,
Yep.
shooting this as this phenomenon's happening of all these video games.
Totally. And that was a hit for me too, actually, is that, I mean, as cheesy and goofy as this movie is, it really made a statement about the time, because I remember at the time arcades just blew up and all the kids were going there and spending all their money on these arcades and spending all day long there and just staring at these screens. And I remember there was uproar in, conservative media, and parents were worried about their kids spending all this time. So to create a movie where they had a businessman who just wanted to shut this place down because it was morally corrupt and it was corrupting his daughter, and his daughter was spending all this time there and spending all her money, and it was a terrible place. That was like, I remember that's actually kind of what was going on. Like,
Yeah.
You did have people who didn't want these places around because they, all the teenagers were just wasting their lives in these arcades. So, I mean, as goofy as it was actually making a statement about what was happening at the time, which,
Yep.
is pretty cool. Like, I mean, they weren't just making a raunchy teen rom-com, they were actually commenting on this is our world right now.
Yeah.
They were having fun with it and being goofy, but it's true. Like that's what it was, which I thought after watching it now, because I've seen this movie lots of times over the years, but this was the first time going back and rewatching it. The first time I actually felt like, wow, this is actually what they're doing. This is
Yeah.
pretty cool. So that was a big hit for me too. That it
Yeah.
really did. The story was legit.
One more little side hit I'll throw into this is the because they had the Pac-Man image that they were allowed to use, they had a wicked Pac-Man transition between scenes
Yes.
sometimes where it had like the actual Pac-Man like go across the screen and like and then behind the Pac-Man the scene would switch, which I thought was pretty funny actually. They didn't use it all the time, but they used it like maybe 3 or 4 times during it. And I'm like, oh, that's a wicked transition. Like that's a really cool
actually you actually heard it rap 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 rap.
Yeah.
Like the actual sound effect. Yeah. It was so fun. Yeah, they really played up the whole Pac-Man thing. All right.
What about a miss?
Because of when it came out in 1983, obviously the times were different.
Yeah.
So there's obviously some inappropriate sort of sexual behavior that happens in this movie that would not fly anymore, obviously. And so it's I mean, it's hard to call it a miss because I mean, that's the way people, that's the kind of movie it was. So, they weren't doing anything that other movies weren't doing. It's just that looking at it now is kind of cringy. There's one scene where a guy who's dressed like a punk rock kind of guy is coming on to a woman. It's actually a guy in disguise as a woman, but he's too stupid to to understand that. So he's coming on to her, but really aggressively. Like he's really aggressively coming on to her, and that's the no, like living in the world we live in now. That was kind of cringy. Like I was
there's a lot of cringy things in this that are like, okay, like, but at the same time, they're like, it is a product of its time, 100%.
Yeah. So I mean, that was, I mean, it's a miss, but it's only a miss because of where we've become, like where we are now in the world. But at the time, it would not have been a miss because people would have that's the kind of movie it was.
Yeah,
So,
it kind of moves into a bit of my miss, which is the cornballery humor in it.
Yeah.
Like it's like, and I know what the kind of movie this is, and I know it's like it's just it just caters to the lowest common denominator. And it has like the kind of goofy stuff, like someone tries to grab a hot dog wiener and it flies across the room into some girl's breasts, like in between them. Like the nerd, like Eugene, like loses his pants at one point. And then it's people like falling on people and people farting and like someone's eating like ketchup on a cookie and like it's just so dumb. Like it's just the dumbest like rude humor you could possibly get, like just lowest common denominator. And it's just, I mean, I know what they're trying to appeal to. Like they're basically appealing to preteens and early teens, essentially, is what they're appealing to, as far as like that shouldn't be really watching this movie. But it's like,
I totally agree. But I think watching it now, that's part of its charm, is that kind of humor, because they don't do that anymore. Like that's not, if they tried to pull them off a movie like that now, it wouldn't work because they'd be trying too hard. But back then that was what was funny.
It reminds me of the humor in a trauma movie. But theirs is like really like pushed out there to the point where it's like it's not funny either, but they're forcing it, whereas this is kind of like this was written to try to be funny. And it's just like, but it's that kind of humor, like just like dumb, like just
it's
visual stupid pranks.
Yes, literally.
But it's so bad that it's not even funny at all. Like it's just so dumb. Like I'm like, oh my god, this is so stupid. I can't believe I would even maybe laughed at this as a kid.
Yeah, it's not. I think it's not funny. I just find it charming because that was the memory of that kind of movie. Like I don't know how many of these kinds of movies we watched. Screwballs, Meatballs. I don't know. But some of them even had better humor than this. Like this. Oh yeah, this is not good writing. So I'm gonna throw another hit in here.
Okay.
this movie had literally every 80s movie comedy stereotype cast in this movie. Literally every like stereotypical goofy teen uh uh character
Yeah.
was part of this movie. They had a jock, like a good-looking jock. They had a slob who was disgusting and gross named Dorfus, who I believe was based on John Belushi in Animal House,
Yeah.
based on Bluto. He was a total Bluto ripoff.
Is this a
Uh,
hit or miss? This is your hit, a
this
hit, right?
this is a hit. This is actually a
Yeah.
hit
Okay.
for me. So they had that. They had the nerd. They had
Yeah.
the pretty but really dumb girls. Then they had sorority girls. They had an angry adult with stupid sidekicks. Like literally every. So it's like every 80s comedy slapstick teen comedy movie you've ever seen, all in one. Because
Yeah.
every one of those stereotypes was in this movie. You had every one of them, and they're just so typical. Like they were just like you couldn't have an 80s like raunchy teen like comedy without these people, and this one had all of them. So I just thought that was so great that they were all there.
There's two archetypes of in this movie that I hate, and I hated him in this movie. The slob. I
Oh
can't
yeah,
stand that like kind of gross slobbish,
yeah,
like where they're always got food hanging out of their
yeah.
mouths and they're farting and they're like, I've never found that even as a kid found that funny. I just always found it gross and disgusting, and like it makes me feel dirty watching this movie. Like when
Yes,
Doofus or whatever his name is, like what's his name again?
Orphus. It
Orphus
was
Dorfus.
Orphus. Yeah.
Like it's just like, and there's always food all. Like, he's gross. Like he's gross,
Yeah.
and like I don't find it funny, and I just find it even in this. I'm like I can't even appreciate it for what it was because it's so. I didn't like it at the time. I don't like it now. I think it's gross. The other
Yeah.
one is the angry punk. Like, and I
Oh
think I've
yeah.
mentioned this before. We did another movie. I can't remember what it was, but it might have been like it was. I think it was a trauma movie where they
Yeah.
always have to have these punks in these movies.
Yeah.
And I find the whole like punk archetype so annoying. Like I just
Yeah.
find them they're always like running in and pushing people and like they're always this like, but they never quite go as far as you think they could go, but they always
Yeah.
sort of, but they're just irritating. And
Yes.
again, they're irritating in this, and I wanted to like slap them all. Like they were so irritating. I just
Yeah.
never liked that archetype. Even as a kid, I never liked that archetype. But
Yeah.
it's like you gotta love the lovable nerd. You gotta love the jock. There's a lot you like of different ones you do have to love, but those two are the worst. Like, like that
See,
was a major miss for me. I was like, oh my god, I want to slap all these people. Like they're so irritating.
see, I'm kind of the opposite with the greasy, disgusting guy. I For whatever reason, I've always found that kind of hilarious, and I don't know why. But like the greasier and grimier they are,
Ugh.
like the more I just think that's just they're so over the top. And this guy, and they always have stupid names like Dorfus, like this is
Or
what's his
booger or
or
whatever they are.
Booger, or yeah, exactly, or Bluto. Like they're always like that, and they all these 80s movies had them, but this one in particular was really gross. Like I don't think it looked like he hadn't washed his hair in about a year. And, like
Yeah.
he was just like dripping in like grease and like fart sounds and stuff coming.
Ugh.
He was literally like just like a cesspool of disgusting. I don't know why I find that funny, but I do.
It
So
was like laugh free,
yeah,
moments in the movie where I'm just like, oh my god, this guy's so irritating. Like,
yeah.
I
And
don't know why. I just don't like. Those are the two archetypes I don't like in movies, and I don't know why it is. I find them like unfunny, and I find them disgusting, and I find them weird. Like,
and they had both in this. The kicker with the Dorfus in this movie was that 1 year prior he was the senior student body president in his high school year, and he was and then within the year he had devolved into this like mess, and they say the reason that happened is because of video games.
that was the only funny part about him. I thought that was the only
Yeah.
like at least I had a bit of a backstory, but
Yeah,
because there's not a lot of
and
backstory in this. There are some.
uh,
There's a little bit, but not
there's
a
a
like.
little for some of the characters. For one of the main characters there was, but that's interesting because that leads me into one of my misses, and that's the punk guy. So
Yeah. What
his name was King Vidiot, and he had a little entourage of like four other punk girls who were also called the Vidiots. And so initially when you're like you said, the punks are supposed to be the bad guy, like the rebels. And like at one point he says, he comes in through a house through a window, and they were like, why did you just use the door? And he's like, because I hate doors. And they're like, why don't you sit down? I hate chairs. So he was like, he's supposed to be that, but then he becomes like the goofiest, like the exact opposite of what you're expecting a bad boy to be. Like he just is like, at one point he's like kind of sobbing a little bit, and like he loves his arcade so much. And he's they don't keep with the character. Like they don't keep him as a bad boy all throughout.
That was the only thing I liked about him, was that I think in this movie, because the villain wants to shut the arcade down, it doesn't matter what like niche you're in and what group you're in, everyone is like together for the same purpose, I guess. Yeah. Like, and that's kind of what he sort of was at one point. But
then he turned and he was working with the bad guy.
Yeah, they paid him off to work for him or whatever.
But the bad guy says he's going to get him his own video game that he's going to be in, and that's how he encourages him to work with him to shut the place down. But it was such, like, you're right, it was such a typical archetype of punk, but it was so 80s, like it was so 1983, like wearing chains and buttons, and he had like multicolored hair and makeup on and leather coat and stuff like that, and then his vidiots, like the girls never actually spoke. They just walked around kind of like they were a video game, because they'd walk around going
yeah.
I'm not sure what they were doing, but yeah, so that was an interesting inclusion, but I think they had to, because that was an archetype of 80s teen comedies, was to have a punk in there, so they put him in there.
Yeah, they got him.
There he was.
Also with the characters, this was a hit for me just because I love this in these movies, is like teenagers that aren't really teenagers. They're actually like probably young adults, like in their 20s, playing teens. And I think they're all in high school. All these kids are supposed to be. I can't remember, but
well, I think they're just out of high school, because the jock says that he and Dorfus graduated from high school last year. So they'd be
so they're just like into college.
Like 19. Yeah, they'd be like 19 or 20, maybe, yeah, something like that.
Like a lot of them didn't look like it. Like some of them did, some of them didn't. But I just love that when they're just like throw these people in that are like supposed to be kids and they're not. Like, it's so ridiculous.
That's funny. All right, so I've got another miss here.
Okay.
So the big capper of this movie is this video game challenge at the end, and they're essentially playing a version of Pac-Man at the end, and it's a weird version. I don't know if I've seen before, but Pac-Man's massive. I'm sure it's real. I just hadn't seen it. But anyway, they're playing with these like life-size joysticks that are on the floor, like they come up off the floor as opposed to a cabinet. So they're staring at big windows. Well, the joysticks have like this massive ball on the end of them, and that's what moves around. They move this around, and on the ball are the buttons that you would use to do things. Well, I guess because it's a movie and it's got to look exciting or whatever, they're constantly pressing these buttons, like they're moving around and pressing the button. Well, Pac-Man doesn't require any button pushing at all. Like you're just literally moving your Pac-Man around a maze. Like I don't recall there ever being need for pressing buttons, and they're like frantically pressing these buttons, and all you're seeing is the Pac-Man like moving around the maze.
Yeah. There's like, what are they doing?
I don't know what they were doing, but that was a big part of it. It's mashing the buttons to make something happen. I don't know what, but but it was weird because they went to the trouble of like acquiring the rights to Pac-Man and these other video games, but they weren't really even playing it properly. Just thought that was so weird.
Dumb.
But anyway, it was a little bit of a miss for me.
I think I just have one more hit left really for this.
Yeah. I've got two.
What you got? What?
Well, I've only got one more hit too, but go ahead.
Okay, the one of my hits was Joe Don Baker, who is like the main villain in it.
Yes.
And the only one that could really act in it.
Yeah, it's true.
And he's one of those actors that you've seen in a million things, but you probably couldn't name him. But if you see him, you'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen him in this or this or this. He's been in a couple Bond movies too. Like, and actually, I looked it up. He was in 2 or 3 Bond movies. I think twice playing the same character, and once, like, not even that many years later, playing a whole different character. He always played a lot of governors, or he played a lot of like people like businessmen, or like someone that's like in control of something, like a boss of some sort, because that's just the kind of like personality he kind of had, or a cop, like a southern cop or something, like but yeah, he was like great. Like I thought he was like to me, he was the highlight of the movie.
Yeah. I literally have down here Joe Don Baker as a hit. That's just the fact that he was in it. I've always been a fan of Joe Don Baker. I mean, again, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what other movies I've seen him in, but I've seen him in everything. Like he's been in, and he just like his look, the way he delivers lines, he's just so like imposing. And I've always thought he was a great actor. Like I just really liked him, and so I think he was really well cast in this movie, because everybody else was so goofy, and then he was this big, like, imposing, I'm gonna take you down, I'm a businessman, I'm gonna take you down. And so I think he really, did something to elevate this movie, by including him in there. So yes, I agree.
Big time. Like he was great.
Yeah, I liked him. So I really only got one more hit, and it's kind of a combination of two things. A couple of the actors who were in this movie actually went on to do other things that you will know. So King Vidiot, who we've talked a lot about, maybe we could throw a picture up of him at some point. His name is John Grease, and he was super goofy in this movie, but he went on to be Uncle Rico in Napoleon Dynamite. Do you remember Napoleon?
Oh yeah,
Dynamite?
Yeah. Holy,
He was that.
that's him. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And even better, in Lost, he was Roger Linus. He was Ben Linus's father in the flashbacks. Remember when they went back?
Oh yeah, jeez. Okay.
He was Roger Linus. So he was a fair big player in that. He's a legitimate actor. Like he went on to
that's cool.
And likewise, Joe Don Baker is the businessman, and his 2 bumbling nephews were just idiots, and they were helping him. One of the bumbling nephews was John. I don't know if you pronounce it Ole or just Ole, but I think it's Ole. John Ole Volstad, whose name you probably don't recognize, but he went on to be the other brother Daryl in Newhart. So there was in Newhart. You remember the TV show? There was Larry, my brother Daryl, and my other brother Daryl. He was the other brother Daryl. He was the one.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So for, I think it was like 11 seasons that show was on, he was the other brother Daryl who didn't. And I was watching this, and I'm like, I totally recognize this guy. Where is this guy from? That's who he was. He was other brother Daryl. So he went on to big fame by landing this role of the non-speaking other brother Daryl. So that's who he was. So I mean, there are some recognizable faces in this movie too. So it's not just a bunch of no names. It's so it's kind of fun to see the where these people got their start. I mean, where they were when they were young. So it was kind of cool to see these people who we've known, in the last decade or more get their start. And so I thought
it's pretty cool that way.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So what do you think this holds up? What do you?
Well, so, to me, it does. Like to me, it's such like I said, it's like the quintessential 80s movie. Like it's from the music to the fashions to the a couple of the characters were Valley Girls and went over the top speaking in Valley Girls speak, just like right at the peak of when that was actually a thing. And all of the video games, like to me, it is so packed full of nostalgia that it works. Now, having said that, I watched it with my son, or at least part of it, who's 20, and he was like, "Yeah, we can turn this off whenever you're ready." So, like, he found it interesting just in watching, the video games and just to see what life was like back then. But as far as a movie goes, there was nothing. So I think it's the kind of movie that you had to grow up with or live it. Like you had to be of that era. Like if you experienced arcades in the early 80s, to me this movie totally holds up, and I really enjoyed watching it because of that. Not because it's a great movie, just because it's so packed with nostalgia.
Yeah, this I liked. I'd say it stands up. Like if you're into, like, if you love nostalgia, you love video games, you love gratuitous nudity, this is the movie for you. It's it to me, this is like a movie that when I see this, it reminds me of the 80s. Like it's the type of movie I would have rented in the 80s from like a Blockbuster or the corner store or whatever. And it's a movie I probably shouldn't have been watching maybe at the time or whatever, but it's like, this is how we got our education, watching these movies. Like, but it's again, like I said before, it's a movie that's of its time. And I love that it was something that was going on at that time, and they were trying to capitalize on it. So it just seemed really authentic as far as like, this is what was really going on. We didn't just find these old video games that we played 10 years ago and tried to recreate that moment. Like they were in the moment. And I don't know. I just, for just the like history's sake of movies or whatever, like it's like, and their history of like the 80s, or if you want like sort of what's going on in the 80s, this is a great movie for that. Is it a good movie generally plot wise? Not really. It's kind of the same plot as a lot of movies, like of that time period. Like even like Breakin's a good example of a movie where they have this community center and there's someone like the business world is trying to take it down and they got to stop it through a competition. And it's exactly the same as this and about 20 other movies at that time. Like there's always something about to be shut down. Someone's always got to stop with a competition of some sort. That's how we stop things in the world, just some sort of weird competition is usually how we do it. We put our best against the corporate's best and see what happens. Like, and roll the dice and see. But yeah, I'd say it stands up 100%.
It does. It's a total time capsule. Like it really is a time capsule. Now, I just want to add one more fun fact. The movie was made on a budget of $300,000, super low budget. But it came out, and by the time it left theaters, it had made $3.9 million. Oh,
so it was a giant hit.
It was the fifth highest grossing movie when it came out.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, that's a giant hit. I mean, made for 300,000, bring in almost 4 million. That's a pretty substantial hit, I'd say.
Yeah.
So I mean, it resonated with people. Like kids were probably going to see it because it's what they were doing. They were seeing, I mean, to the extreme. Obviously, not everybody was living like this, but
no. In fact, no teen ever lived like this. But
no, not really. No. But it totally resonated with the audiences at the time. And if you're our age and lived it, I think it'll resonate with you now.
I was always living the naughty side of the arcade.
Yes. Exactly.
But no, it was good. I'm glad we were able to watch it again, and it's available. You can get like a copy. Like there's a brand new release of it that you can get off Amazon or at your store, and then it's also on Tubi.
Yep, it is on Tubi for free. So I mean, you have to put up with some commercials every once in a while, but it's uncut, so you can watch the whole thing for free on Tubi, which is what I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. Again, check out our socials, and this is our last episode of the season.
Yep, season 6. This is season 6.
Yeah, is this season 5 or 6?
I don't know. We're
I think this was 5.
I think it was 6, but I could be wrong.
I don't know anymore. I really don't know. But
anyway, we will be coming back.
Yeah, we're coming back in September. So again, if you have any ideas for movies we should watch or anything we should do, just send them our way and we'll see what we can do with it. Because it's always fun if we find something. Every once in a while we find something we both haven't seen, which is kind of fun. And I've got some ideas for next season, like for some stuff I think we could have some fun with. So thanks for joining us this season, and we'll see you next time on Loop and Larry, Guardians of Geek.
Bye-bye.
Produced by Matthew C. Loop and Lawrence Simner. A Loop and Larry production.
Bueller.
He likes it. Hey, Mikey.
Bueller.
Bad news. Fog is getting thicker.
And Leon's getting larger.
Inconceivable.
Brian's right. It's an elf.
Wax on.
Does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe?
Oh, Captain, my captain.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Wax off.